found, unfortunately, except in one case, which is a British journalist, that they have eventually been executed. So it seems that their willingness to negotiate is really very, very limited. And we saw that at the beginning of this, Poppy, with the demand for $200 million. That's just a completely unreasonable demand that was never going to happen. I mean, when we've seen hostage exchange, we've seen numbers in the sort of low several $1 million at most. So no government was ever going to kind of agree to that. So it raises a big question, Poppy. I think we still have an American female who a 26-year-old aid worker who's been held by ISIS. We still have a British hostage held by ISIS. And there may well be others. And what is their fate? The only, I think, good thing that has come out of this, and there's, it's difficult to say a good thing. There is one thing that has come out of this that is new, Poppy, which is that we seem to have a way to speak to ISIS that we didn't have before. We have been, there was an American journalist called Theo Curtis who was being held by Al-Qaeda in Syria. He's now free. He's back in the United States. And there was, basically it was the Qatari government that facilitated his release. So there may be some way in to speak to ISIS, and of course they haven't shown to be rational negotiators hitherto, but at least we now have some kind of form of communication with them that we didn't have in the past.
So on that point, Peter Bergen, thank you. Stay with us. Chris Voss, to you now, a former FBI hostage negotiator. These lines of communication were open. There was some hope. But without that proof of life, did ISIS simply give up and say we're going to yet again do something as brutal, as gruesome, as barbaric as this, just to show them meet our demands immediately or else?
Right, well, first of all, I think the lines of communication have always been there behind the scenes, and whether or not they're rational is really a matter of definition. Now, I'm not sure that they gave up here, or whether or not they're just trying to cover up they didn't have the ability to comply with the negotiations. To me, it's a little bit more of a temper tantrum based on people who have an inability to negotiate as opposed to being irrational or being not being able to define the negotiations themselves.
So that's a good point, because a question a lot of us have been asking here and talking about is, can ISIS even be trusted to negotiate with?
I think they can. I think they're eminently predictable, and it's been my business and hostage negotiators' business for a long period of time. The reason we engage in these communications is to understand what they look like when they're telling the truth, what they look like when they're lying. And everybody has a set of rules, and once you learn how to navigate in the other side's rules, that's how you beat them at their game, instead of trying to get them to navigate within your rules. And that's the first step for dealing with ISIS. I think Jordan did a good job here, actually.
Bob Baer, to you, what is your take on this? It was just last weekend we were discussing this. There was hope that some deal would be reached so that Kenji Goto could be released. To you, Bob Baer.
The negotiators that I've talked to that have worked with the Islamic State before describe them as unpredictable in the sense that they can be very reasonable for long periods of time and sound calm, and for no apparent reason they'll just flip out and they'll do what we would consider things that are psychotic and not in their interests. You have to keep in mind that their execution of these hostages over the last year or so has alienated them so much from the West that it's costing them lives. I mean, I don't think we would be as engaged in Iraq and Syria if it weren't for these executions. So at the end of the day, they may think they're rational, but in fact they're not. They are just bringing down this movement much more quickly.
To you, Tom Fuentes, what do you think that this does, if anything, in terms of changing the game in this, what has become a protracted battle against ISIS, and the best way to fight and defeat ISIS? Because now it is all too common that we are having to bring this news that yet another hostage, whether it is an American, a British citizen, now a Japanese citizen, being beheaded by ISIS.
Well, we have to look at what is their real goal in the whole situation, Poppy, from the time that they had the Japanese hostages as well as the Jordanian pilot. And what I mean by that is when they put the demand out for $200 million, that wasn't a serious demand. But what they've gotten, and I think did meet their goal completely, was they've got the whole world to become very sympathetic to the Japanese hostages, particularly the last one, Kenji Goto, the whole nation of Japan to learn to revere this man and root for him and hope for him. So they commanded the world stage, the worldwide media, all this time, and when they got tired of it, they killed him. And they got what they wanted. They got a nonstop attention and coverage. So we think that it was irrational, but on the other hand, from their point of view, possibly very rational.
Tom Fuentes, stand by. I want to go to Aaron McPike, our White House correspondent in Washington, D.C. And as I go to Aaron, let me read the statement that we just got from NSC spokesperson Bernadette Meehan saying, "We've seen the video purporting to show that Japanese citizen Kenji Goto has been murdered by the terrorist group ISIL. We are working to confirm its authenticity. The United States strongly condemns ISIL's actions, and we call for the immediate release of all remaining hostages. We stand in solidarity with our ally, Japan." Aaron, I know it is early going here, but are we hearing anything else out of Washington?
Well, Poppy, I would point out that the National Security Council put out a very similar statement last weekend, and obviously this is news to the White House as well. What I would say is because this video is somewhat different than some of the videos we've seen in the past, you can be sure that intelligence officials and other Defense Department officials as well will be really looking for what kind of clues they can glean from this. We've been talking for the past couple of months about how the Defense Department is saying that they are having a lot of success with some of the airstrikes and the fight against ISIS that's happening in Iraq and Syria. Obviously, it hasn't stopped these executions, but maybe with this new video, they can get a little bit more from those details. I'd also point out that in the last week, President Obama has spoken with the Prime Minister of Japan, and obviously they're going to be working closely with the Japanese and building a bigger coalition here to see what more they can do to stop these executions and stop ISIS from some of these actions.
Absolutely. Aaron McPike, stand by for us in Washington. I want to get back to Germana Karache, who is with us in Amman. Before I do, I want our viewers and Germana, listen to this. This is the wife of hostage who has just been beheaded, Japanese citizen Kenji Goto, speaking out just yesterday. Listen.
My husband and I have two very young daughters. Our baby girl was only 3 weeks old when Kenji left. I hope our oldest daughter, who is just 2, will get to see her father again. I want them both to grow up knowing their father. My husband is a good and honest man who went to Syria to show the plight of those who suffer. I believe that Kenji may have also been trying to find out about Haruna Yukawa's situation. I was extremely saddened by the death of Haruna, and my thoughts go out to his family. I know all too well what they are going through.
That was the wife of Kenji Goto just yesterday. Let me go to Germana Karache. She joins us now in Amman, Jordan. Germana?
Poppy, there are lots of questions here about that demand for the release that ISIS had put out for the release of Sajid al-Rishawi, and many people have been asking whether that demand was real by ISIS. They were questioning how genuine that was, or whether it was more to try and embarrass the Jordanian government and put pressure on this government that is seen as one of the greatest enemies of ISIS in this part of the world. And it really is here locally, of course, there was a lot of pressure on the government. There was a lot of concern that if Sajid al-Rishawi was not released, if Jordan did not comply with that and the Jordanian pilot had been executed, that there will be some sort of trouble in this country because of the tribe that the Jordanian pilot came from and the pressure the government was under to do this, but also because of its relations internationally with Japan, for example, putting Jordan in that very, very tough situation over the past 10 days or so, because Japan did set up a crisis center here in Jordan when that $200 million demand first came out by ISIS for the 2 hostages. Japan sent its highest level delegation here with the deputy foreign minister. They set up a crisis center. They were trying to use Jordan as a regional headquarters to try and coordinate whatever efforts there were to secure the release and negotiate. And it does seem, this is a feeling here, that one of the things that ISIS was trying to do possibly here is to embarrass Jordan by asking for something that the country could not really deliver and really sabotage its relations with Japan and other countries internationally.
Germana, thank you very much for your reporting on this tonight and throughout. Stand by. We're going to continue to cover this here on CNN. The tragic breaking news. Let me reset this all for our viewers. Breaking news here on CNN.